Hey, what's up guys? JB here. So our fan-voted Shadowlynx unit has finally joined us here in War of the Visions Global this week. However, much to many people's dismay out there, she is actually a new dark unit. And she is going to mark the third new 100 cost dark unit that has debuted in the game this year. Now I have to say that personally I am a bit disappointed in that development as well. You know, Dark at this point really just didn't need another high-powered 100 cost unit, especially when we have Sephiroth and a new Warrior of the Crystal for Dark coming next year as well. Now, that said, you know, the artwork that they had teased before, it looks even more amazing now that it's in the game. And, you know, they have kind of settled on this sort of ice skating or ballet kind of theme, which, you know, personally I do think is kind of cool. You know, I think there is some common themes there, you know, between those kind of sports and with ninja kind of agility and movement in general. So, you know, I do kind of like that. But what is she actually going to be packing in her kit to kind of back up the aesthetics? You know, is she going to make a compelling choice to actually join your dark roster? Well, let's dive in and let's find out what she can actually do. Now, Shadowlynx on Ice is a 100 cost dark unit, and she has base 3-1 movement, and she can wear hats and cloth. Her TMR is her bellflower dress. I'm kind of mixed on this one. The base stats on the piece I'd say are a little bit underwhelming for a cloth. The effect I do kind of like though, it is going to dispel haste as well as regen on your target. We don't actually see a ton of regen in the game, you know, a few units have it here and there, so that portion I think is fairly niche. However, haste is a huge part of the game, especially with a unit like Velis. Now, whether this TMR is good enough to actually dedicate a TMR slot and potentially bypass another useful buff in your party, you know, at that point it just kind of depends on the team that you have and, you know, whether you actually have a dispel effect ability already available to you. You know, of course that is already going to remove haste already today. Now, moving down to her stats, she does have a pretty solid HP and attack values here for both her base and innate. It definitely is going to put her, I think, firmly in that bruiser class when it comes to those two categories. Her dex value is another big highlight for her. It's a very strong value here, and that is going to directly impact her crit value, and she's actually going to be in the top 5 for innate crit opportunity in all of War of the Visions. And you're definitely going to be able to bank on this unit critting almost every time that she takes a swing. Now, in terms of her luck value, definitely middle of the road when it comes to her innate value. And when we actually are factoring in the board value, she doesn't get a huge bump there. So she's actually going to be looking at, you know, a below average for her total luck value here, which is a little bit of a concern. And of course, that's going to directly impact her evade levels, where she is actually coming in well below average there and is definitely not an evade unit. Now, her agility is actually pretty good. She is coming in just above average there for both base and innate values. And she's actually going to be a very fast unit because she does have a passive ability there, which is going to be able to increase that even further. Now, her accuracy for her base value isn't really looking all that great, you know, just due to that, you know, sort of middling luck that we were talking about. However, you know, when we are factoring in passive abilities, she does have a very nice passive for accuracy, so she can actually push up to a 185 innate level, which is actually a pretty solid starting point if you did want to build her as more of an accuracy-focused unit. Now, for her mastery ability, she's going to get 10 area resists. You know, I definitely always like to see that, so good start. She's going to add to that 20 crit rate, which, you know, I did actually factor into that innate value that we were just looking at there below. On the defensive front, we are looking at 0 defense and 0 spirit. Definitely not the sort of base mitigation layer that I like to see on any bruiser in the game. Her resistances, though, you know, are actually pretty good. She has 10 to slash, pierce, and magic, and then she is coming in with 22 missile damage. Now, her only weakness here is going to be towards strike. That's actually a pretty common one to see, and, you know, up until more recently, it was one that I often threw out, but with units like Snow now in the game, and then in the future, there's going to be quite a few very good strike units. It's definitely going to be more of a concern here, you know, as we start pushing into 2023. Now, for her ailment resistances, she is getting slow and disable, and then she has a minor resistance there to blind. Slow, I think, is definitely useful against units like Summer Jaden. Disable, you know, we don't actually often see it these days in the game, unless you're maybe going up against a gunner or a sniper unit. But, you know, you never really know when these ailments are going to come in and out of the meta. All it takes is, you know, one powerful unit dropping to have one of these, and then suddenly they can become very good. All right, moving next into her support abilities and counters. Ice Gliding Fairy is going to be her #1 passive, and as usual within these unique jobs, it's definitely going to be an always on for her. And that's because it's coming in with a tune-up time equivalent, 12% agility, agility and 40% defense penetration. And this is really her only passive that has defense penetration, so I do actually think it's pretty important for her. Now in terms of a build, I would probably most often pair that with her Nightblade Mastery. That's going to give her that 30% attack and the 25 accuracy that we were just talking about a few minutes ago. It's a very nice passive. That's one of the best parts of having Nightblade as a job. However, I do think that she does have some other options that she can play with here. Violet Shadow is going to give her that additional mobility. And that's really the main reason that you're going to want to use that one. I think that 60% attack looks very nice on paper. And for PvE, where you may not be getting hit as much, that certainly is going to be very nice there. But in PvP play, it's just going to be essentially one hit on this unit, and that is going to be gone. So it's really not going to be all that reliable. Maybe if you have a healer behind her, maybe it could be a little bit more interesting to sort of top her off and get that boost back on. But, in general, I would probably use this one purely for that mobility, and then, use anything else that you get on top of that as a bonus. Now, interestingly, she does have the Hunter sub job, so, you could opt to lean a bit into that sub and then kind of boost her range a bit there with the range up passive. I definitely think that's a bit more niche, but it could actually be pretty interesting in some scenarios, and, maybe even one that I would consider for manual play just to kind of give her that boost in range. Now, looking over at the counters that she has available to her, the new counter that she gets from her main job, I'm not super in love with it. It is a bit limited in its range and range pattern. It's also not a preemptive strike, and it can actually even potentially hit your teammates on this as well if things line up correctly. So I think, for those reasons, I would probably most often use Dark Snare from her Hunter job. It actually doesn't do any damage, but it does actually come with some very nice debuffs for both missile and dark resistance. And as you can see there in the graphic, very, very strong range on it. So, I do actually kind of like that, especially if you're going up against any sort of missile units. All right, guys, so let's move into the main kit here next, and we're going to start with her buffs. Her self buff is the Stance of the Daisy. It's a quite amazing buff. It has 4 different effects on it, which is nice. It's going to give her an incredible 30 area resist, 25 missile resist, an additional +1 on her jump, as well as 20 AP restored every time that she gets a crit. So this buff obviously is really key for this unit's survivability with that huge area resist and missile resist that it gives. And of course you can stack that with the 10 area resist that she got from her mastery, as well as a party vision card, and it's very easy to get her up to an impressive 60 area resist. Now obviously that's not really going to do a whole lot for this unit in terms of survivability if she is sort of picked off with a single target attack, so definitely something to keep in mind with this unit. Now in terms of the rest here, the missile resist, obviously that's going to allow her to stack that up very nicely with the base value that we looked at. Of course, there are units out there that don't really care about missile resist, now in the game. We're seeing penetration values up in the 60s, up to 70 even on some units, so definitely another thing to keep in mind in the modern state of the game. The +1 jump there is pretty nice too. You can kind of pair that with that passive we were looking at and get her up to a 4-2 movement, which is pretty strong. The 20 AP restored though is obviously super nice for this unit's AP sustain. Most effects that we've seen similar to this thus far in the game have only granted 10 on those crits thus far. Her second buff here is going to be Dance of the Violet, and that's going to grant a protect effect to the party, as well as a 40% attack and 25% agility just to herself. So another pretty nice buff here. It definitely helps her lean a bit more into that physical bruiser side, while, kind of giving her a nice speed and attack buff there on top. Now this buff actually may be one that you would potentially turn off, depending on who else is in your party. If you were pairing her with Joker, for example, you could allow him to provide that protect buff, and that would actually free Lynx up to do something else. And she actually does within her sub-jobs have some nice options there. All right, let's actually move into her attacks here now. And Break Pierce is going to be her low AP finisher skill. This is a range 4 straight line with a range height of 1. It has that low 121% mod. And it's going to bring a break here of 43% attack and magic. Nothing special here, as noted in other videos, depending on the base stats of your opponent. This is generally representing a 10 to 15% damage loss, to your target. Now, Ending Axle is going to be a large diamond AoE. That's going to get up to a range of 5, and it's going to get up to a range height of 2 as well on the area of effect. This one is going to bring just a single effect on it, and it's going to work much like Lightning's Life Siphon ability, where on a kill shot, it's going to restore 15 AP back to Lynx. and that can actually trigger up to 2 times. So, the potential there is that she can kill 2 different enemies, and, assuming this self buff is active, she's going to actually pull back 50 AP on that, with the crit and then the 2 kill shots. And that would actually be a net of 16 AP back to her, after you factor in the cost of the skill here. So pretty insane. That's actually going to allow her to string off many attacks with, really not having to rely on something like Ziza's bells. Now her third attack here is called Triple Sequence. This is a range 3 with a range height of 1. It's a medium 165 mod, and it is a 3-hit attack. Now prior to the damage, we have 2 effects coming on the skill. She's going to completely seal the opponent's counters for 3 turns, and she's also actually going to increase her defense penetration here by 40%. So along with the passive she has and some gear, it's very easy to get this unit to a place where she's going to completely ignore defense, which is very, very strong. Now, Perfect Launch is the name of her Job 25 ability. This is a range 3 with a range height of 1, and it has a large 200% mod. This one is a pretty simple attack, and this one is going to have a guaranteed hit effect on it. So definitely really nice that she has this to kind of fall back on if the accuracy really isn't there for her. Maybe you've focused on other things, like maybe building her up for a bit more survivability. This one is just a bit limited in its range, and of course, if you're up against multiple evade units, the usage of the skill actually could be a factor. So definitely something to keep in mind there, in terms of whether you actually want to focus on accuracy with this unit. Now the last skill up here is her Limit Burst. This one is called Skating Lynx, and it is again going to be a range 3 with a range height of 1. And we have a standard 200% LB mod here, and it is a 2-hit attack. Now prior to the damage, this one is a 38% Dark Imperil, and then post damage, it is breaking the agility of your target by 25% as well. This is just an insane limit burst, guys. It's going to be great in all phases of the game. It's going to give Dark a source of a Dark Imperil on a modern unit, which is something they've been lacking, ever since Dwayne and Helena have kind of fallen off in their play in the meta. This one is probably one of the best guild raid skills that I've ever seen on any unit, and she is going to be a staple in your Dark guild raid team from here on out. So overall, this is a decently well-rounded kit. Her buffs are bringing her a bit of survivability, while her attacks are definitely more focused on the offensive output. She's certainly going to be capable of putting out some massive damage here. Definitely concerning, though, that we aren't seeing any sort of barrier break, no sort of protect dispel either, so definitely something to keep in mind for this unit. All right, let's dig into her sub-jobs here next. She's getting 2 additional skills from her Purple Fairy job. The first one is Slumber of the Iris. It's a pretty forgettable TP-based skill, which is a 25% chance to doom and sleep on the target. Something that I think you'd ever see coming out as kind of a Hail Mary in manual play, or maybe up against, a PvE trial or something. The second attack here, though, is quite nice. This one is called Cross Stroke. This one gets up to a range of 4 on the cross AoE, and post damage, it is a 25% pierce resistance and peril. Now, in terms of autoplay, this is actually a skill you would see come out from time to time if she's able to line up the same amount of targets in this area of effect as she was, in the Big Diamond AoE that we looked at just a few minutes ago. And that's because they're both equal in their modifier, but this skill here is actually a cheaper cost, so, the AI does put preference to those. So it's definitely a solid enough skill here that, you might consider using this job from time to time. She does have 2 other very nice sub-jobs here, though, and they are going to give her access to 2 other different damage types. And the first one is Hunter, which is going to give her those missile attacks. Tracking Techniques is a very nice buff in that job, one that you could opt to use instead of her Protect buff that we were looking at there. She does also have access to the other buff from Hunter, which is that +1 range and 60 accuracy buff. Could be very, very nice for manual play where, you could still build her up very bruisery, but have this 60 accuracy steroid to kind of fall back on and kind of carry you there. In terms of attack skills from the job, she's going to get that Berserk Arrow, which is kind of interesting, but really the marquee skill is going to be the Warning Volley. It's a large block AoE, it's a nice range on it, and it does actually drop the CT of the enemies by 15%. So actually could be very strong if you were using Lynx with the Thornlit to actually drop the agility on those targets there as well, and potentially set up maybe some lapping or double turning there. Now her third job here is Nightblade, and that's going to give her access to slashing attacks. Missile and pierce resistance on units tends to be sort of grouped together in the game. So if you are sort of worried about being shut down maybe by higher resistance types in those areas, this this actually could be a good one to look at, especially since Dark does have the Anima Vision card, which gives a very high amount of slash resistance penetration. Now, Maiming Slash and Spinning Slash are very nice skills. They have nice modifiers and kind of give her access to more area of effect damage. And Maiming Slash in particular does have very nice utility on it with the healing down debuff. In the near future, the job will actually be getting some enhancements as well. And Maiming Slash does get a very nice boost with that. It's going to add an additional range onto the skill, as well as a 100% counter reduction to your target. So very, very nice skill in the future. All right, guys, moving on here. And along with Shadowlynx, we did get a new vision card this week. It's called With Swan Like Grace. And this is actually a global exclusive job-based vision card. Taking a look at the stats here, the base stats are pretty decent. It's got a solid HP value and attack, as well as some flat dexterity there. On the bestowed, you have an unconditional 8% agility. And then we do have a limited bestowed as well, which for each version of Shadowlynx, they are going to pick up 20 dark attack, which is a very high modifier there for a bestowed. So the party effect here is going to provide 24% missile resist, so 4% higher than we've seen on other vision cards in the past. It is going to get 40% attack and 25 crit damage there as well, so pretty strong offensive card, especially if you are looking to build anti-missile. Now you can see here the main portion of the slide here. I have once again separated the elements and the units who are able to use the card as of today. Focusing there, on Dark first, along with Shadowlynx. It could potentially be a nice card in the future for a Dark setup if we were to see, significant upgrades to Dwayne and or Kane. The Dark Bros, unfortunately, aren't really anywhere near what they used to be. So, barring significant upgrades for those units, I don't really view this as a strong Dark card, in particular today. It could actually be a pretty good mono card for some other elements out there, ice or fire in the future, especially when Yuffie comes along into the game. And then earth and wind actually have some nice units here as well that can use the card. My only sort of caveat there is that, those elements outside of fire, already today have very nice options, when it comes to attack and offensive based cards. Although some of those cards for those elements are limited time, like the Noctis Vision card for Earth or a gift like no other for Wind. So, if you don't have those, it could potentially be a decent card to grab if you were looking for a 2-for-1 card that you could use on some Earth and Wind units, and for some other elements for that matter. So I think that does leave this card as potentially interesting for a multi-element Pierce team, especially since Pierce units do sort of lean predominantly anti-missile. I think at this point there just really aren't a ton of other job-based cards that are impacting Pierce units in particular. So, we may be waiting just a bit to kind of see the full power of this card. And that's kind of just the situation that we are in with job-based vision cards at this point. I will say, though, that a very strong agility card is just dropping with the Full Metal Alchemist collaboration over on the Japanese side. It does have an amazing 18% agility as well as some single target resistance on it. So it could be really nice for a Pierce team, but obviously it's just going to be a bit of a waiting game there. So in that regard, I kind of view this card as maybe one that could be safely skipped and maybe that you could pick up later, maybe once that card is closer to being released. So we did get a new piece of equipment along with Shadowlynx, and this is called the Winged Lance. And this one is coming in just a single type that maxes out all of its stats as level 30, like we've seen with other Global Fest units. This one is going to be a crit type, as the base stats here have a moderate attack of 139, but also bringing in a very solid 20 accuracy and 18 crit value. Now we do have an unconditional passive here for 20 pierce attack. So this one is actually very close to the Final Fantasy IV Cane Spear, just missing the agility here in the stats. It does, however, have two very nice offensive-focused conditional passives here, which is actually going to work on the majority of non-unique spear jobs in the game. And this one is going to bring in 30% attack as well as 15 crit damage there on top. Very nice weapon here. I think it might have actually been nice maybe to see something like Pierce Res penetration on this weapon, maybe like a 20% Pierce there to kind of give this a unique niche in the game. But, I think they have actually been pretty hesitant to kind of move in that direction for Pierce units. It's one of the only damage types sort of next to strike damage that hasn't really seen any significant source of penetration value yet in the game. Now, personally, I actually do like this weapon more than the Platinum Lance that kind of gives that initial AP, because, as we sort of talked about, I think that Lynx is going to be very adept at sort of keeping her AP up, with those skills that we looked at. And, that ending axle in particular is going to allow her to sort of keep going there in battle. All right, so here is a mock build that I've put together, and this team here is designed to go against a light missile team featuring Jaden. Now, at the same time, we are trying to avoid Elena teams with this. We're not really built up, in terms of our accuracy here all that high. Now, the idea here with this team is that Lynx would move in and buff Shell onto Lemurray, pick up the haste and the light resist from her teammates, and then sort of move in with their self buff with the missile resist and area resist there on top. Now, the producer's bow tie, I'm going to have that equipped on Lemurray here, and that's going to be sort of to attract a mid-fight volley from Jaden. She's going to be bulky enough here with Shell and the light resist to be able to take one hit from Jaden. Now, I think that in turn should buy enough time for Lynx and Fina to maybe take down the front line and then get back and finish off Jaden. So here in the build, you will notice that I am leaning as heavily into light resistance as I can. We unfortunately do not have the dark ring yet from the tower, but when we do get that, this build will potentially be even better. Despite that though, here in the build, I do have both Dark Fina and Lynx at 50% light resist or better, and that is before she gets that light resist active buff there off in battle. Now, I am using Alexandrite rings here, not because of the accuracy, but because of the all element resistance that they bring. And that is going to stack with the light resistance passive as well as the HP Trust Stone set bonus that we have here in the build. Now, my agility is just a bit slower here, just due to the choice of Esper here in Demon Wall, and also due to the placement of the Black Rose here, just to kind of maximize some of the other effects. However, I do believe that Hasteja and the Bold Leela TMR will help compensate for that greatly. Now, one other thing that I do want to point out here in the build is that Thancred's TMR is currently the highest light resist armor in the game at 15%, and I do have that equipped on Dark Fina. Now, a definite key to the build here is having that time-limited Esper in Demon Wall. If you don't have that one, then Anima would also work, but at that point, Fina would actually be losing, substantial light resist. Now, if you don't have either of those options, I think at that point, maybe a heavy light resist build, could potentially be out of the cards for you. At that point, I would probably just lean as far as I could into agility and also missile resist. Now, in terms of the trust stones in the builds, I did touch on the HP side here already, but the focus there essentially is going to be that missile and light resistance. And again, that's going to be tied into that HP set for the all element 5% resistance bonus that brings. On the right side, I am using an agility set. I have my standard utility stone there in slot 1, dark attack and defense penetration on stone 2, and then reaction block and healing power there on stone 3. And that healing power I do have there, just in case in the mid fights or maybe in between battles, Lemurray is able to toss off a Curaga and maybe gets a little bit more healing there onto Lynx. So that is the build, guys. I don't have my Lynx up to 120 quite yet, but assuming that you get the abilities lined up, I think that it should actually fare pretty well. If you do want to take a closer look at the build, I will have the link to it in the description below, as always. So what is my verdict today on Shadowlynx? Well, starting with the good, this unit is going to pack an absolute punch on offense. She's going to be armed with that 38% Dark Imperil, as well as a Pierce Res Imperil. And she's going to have access to very high defense penetration, which is going to make her damage difficult to mitigate for many units out there. And not only that, she does have access to very large area of effect damage, and with her Hunter and Nightblade jobs, she's going to bring access to 3 different damage types, which makes her very versatile, and that's going to help her navigate her way against highly pierce-resistant foes. All the while, she's going to be keeping her AP gauge increasing with a combination of AP restores in her kits. And then her Limit Burst, not only amazing for PvP, but, may very well be the best singular skill that I've seen for guild raids, where, it has that perfect combination of a Dark Imperil, an Agility Break, and then is also a 2-hit attack there on top of it. On the more negative side, this unit does lack, just a bit when it comes to utility and really isn't offering a ton, to the party in that area. She's notably lacking when it comes to any sort of barrier or protect breaks, or really any way to deal with re-raise or courage on an opponent. Now, while her general HP pool and area resist potential are very nice, she is very much lacking when it comes to any kind of survival tools or barrier of her own. No re-raise or courage, no reflex or auto heal back either. And that's really going to limit her ability to sort of bail herself out of those fatal situations, meaning that this unit really is going to be at her best when she is not the center of attention, where she can get cut down very easily by single tile attacks. And while Dark has several very nice bruisers that she could pair with, they are still very much lacking when it comes to a true frontline presence where, she could kind of hide behind and be a bit more comfortable. So my final take here is that, this is a very dangerous damage dealer, but with the lack of given survival tools to this unit, I'd say that she is much closer to a glass cannon than an actual bruiser, particularly when it comes to single tile attacks. Of which, in the future of the game, we are going to be seeing on many new units, single tile attacks which can target multiple enemies. So because of those reasons, I can see this unit potentially falling a bit out of favor unless she were to get a very nice level 140 treatment of her own. All right, guys, so that is my take today on Shadowlynx. There's definitely some stuff to like here. A very strong damage dealer, as we noted. Very nice guild raid unit. I can see her actually being very good for manual play there as well, with the combination of pierce and missile attacks. And especially if you were able to pair her along with a quickener or a CT booster to help kind of push her, across the map. There are just a few glaring weaknesses here that we talked about, and kind of comparing her amongst other top 100 cost units that we've received in the game, I think that there may just be a few more flaws in this unit than some others, at least right now in this level 120 era. I know that this video is a little bit later than I would like. I'm definitely a little bit behind on my videos right now just because of the holiday season and kind of all that's going on. It's been kind of crazy here. In a bit of channel news here though, we are getting so very close to that 2,000 subscriber mark. So, if you do enjoy what I'm doing here on the channel, help me hit that milestone and help push me over 2,000. On that same note, in early February, we will be celebrating the first year anniversary of the channel here. And you guys, from a support standpoint, have been absolutely incredible to kind of see that growth and kind of seeing the feedback and things on the channel. It's been absolutely amazing for me. So honestly, thank you for that. I don't really make these videos for money or any kind of recognition or pat on the back. I honestly do these videos because I love the game and I want to see the game succeed, and I want good information to be out there for the players to make informed decisions. So, we're going to be doing a lot more of that in 2023, and I really look forward to seeing what's to come. So that's really all that I have to say for today. So as always, stay safe out there, have a great New Year's, and I will see you guys next year.